guys at the CBD Relief Center. I am your host, Meg Mutt, of course. We are so excited to have this event today. It came about really because Aman and I were chatting about how she had just helped a client in her recent divorce, and so we met with Shawn, who is our expert divorce attorney, and we just wanted to, there's just things that we need to know about when you're going through a divorce, and creating a great team around you to be able to give you the most up-to-date information and really valuable information is super, super important. So we'll get started. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
Oh, mind you, we're here at the CBD Relief Center, located at 143 Elm Grove Ave on the east side. We have any kind of CBD products you need. You can come in and try. We have gummies, pain creams. We have, I'm just bought something for her crazy dogs. So come and check us out. Always, support small businesses. If you can write us a review on Google, we would love that. So we'll get started. So I would love you guys to introduce yourselves.
So my name is Aman Daniels. I am from Movement Mortgage on the Delmonico team. Really excited to be here. As Meg said, this was just something that kind of came up, two girls over lunch, and we were talking about, just things that we've been going through in our businesses, and I feel like this is a really important topic that not a lot of people really want to talk about, and so I'm excited to kind of learn with everyone today a little bit more about this topic.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing that came out of our conversation when we met last week was that 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and then the second time around it's 67%?
67%. So my name is Shawn Masterson, an attorney with the law firm Shapiro, Dory Masterson here in Providence. I'm licensed to practice throughout New England. I do a lot of real estate work, but my primary focus is in family law. That's divorce mediation, child custody, child support, that sort of stuff. And that's done primarily in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So the statistic, 50% of first marriages, and more importantly, 67% of second marriages. So you're going to be affected by this one way or another. Either you're going to be divorced, or somebody close to you is going to be divorced.
So like 1.5 of us today could possibly be divorced. I don't know, unless, not the audience, obviously.
I'll take the part of that because I am a victim of divorce. Right? So, but here's the thing. When I got divorced, I was a divorce attorney. So I knew what was going to happen.
Right.
Okay? I knew what the laws were, but it's very emotional. Even though I knew what was happening, what was going to happen, what my rights were, I understood what equitable distribution is.
Which I did not.
And we'll explain that in a little bit, but there's still a hesitation, there's still a little bit of fear. So when, the lay person, if you will, that's not an attorney, that hasn't been divorced, that's not involved in some aspect of divorce, there's an unknown, and whenever there's an unknown, there's a fear, right? What am I gonna do? And with real estate is probably the primary financial piece of a divorce for the overwhelming majority of cases, right? So we talked last week about this, but it's the kids first. Right. So you're in a divorce situation, listen, kids are primary, particularly if they're young. Once your kids hit 18, 19, 20, they're really not a factor.
Right.
But when you have children, and the children are 7, 8, 9 years old, that's your primary concern, because where are you going to live? If you're getting divorced, somebody's moving out of that marital home. It might be both of you, it might just be, one person. But ideally, you would want the children to stay, from a transition standpoint, to stay in that house if at all possible, or at a minimum, to stay in the same neighborhood, the same locale. Go to the same schools, have the same group of friends,
right?
Same little league
team. Not disrupt it even more.
Right. So that first instance, right? So one of the big questions that I get is, I'm contemplating divorce.
Mhm.
Where do I go? Can I stay in the house? What happens if I leave? What happens to my rights vis-a-vis that home if I decide to leave?
Right, and that was something that we had spoken about, which was like, all right, so what does happen? I mean, I had heard that if you leave the home, it's considered abandonment, or, so what should you do if there's that point where you're like, I mean, we had talked about 2 points, really. The first point was, if you need to get out, be safe. And then the second thing, if you wanted to kind of discuss like what you should be thinking about.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, if there's a safety issue, get out,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you live, let's say, for example, you live in Providence and you want to get divorced in Rhode Island. In order to get divorced in Rhode Island, you have to live in the state for at least a year before you file. So you might say, listen, I'm in this dire situation, I have to get out, but my only option is to move into maybe a friend's house, a parent's house, and they live in Seekonk, different state,
Right.
okay? If that's the case, you can still use Rhode Island if you're escaping the marital home from a domestic violence situation, okay? We've had that situation before. But don't worry about the time of your divorce, worry about your safety, number one, right? That's primary. But let's say you just say, you know what, it's not a safety issue, but I just can't, I can't see myself residing in the same house as my spouse, knowing that we're gonna get divorced. We tried
Stressful.
counseling, stressful,
Yeah.
it's anxiety ridden, particularly if you're a small business person and you need to have that good positive mental mindset.
Yeah.
You need to leave, okay? So if you say, you know what, I'm packing up my bags, I'm gonna go move in, I rented an apartment, or I'm moving in with a friend, you don't lose your rights to the equity in the house by leaving under those circumstances.
Okay, awesome,
Okay.
that is good to know.
Okay, so
So,
now, keep in mind, you may, if you move out and you set up a new residence, right? So you got a new apartment and you're in there, you may lose the right just to walk into the property,
of course.
right? Now, you're still an owner, you still technically have the right absent a restraining order. But if you think about it just in terms of trying to navigate as amicably as possible your divorce,
Mm-hmm.
you don't wanna say, okay, I moved out, I'm just gonna randomly walk back into the house.
Right,
Because you wouldn't want your spouse randomly walking into your new apartment,
right.
right? So, but you're not gonna lose your opportunity, to get the equity that's in the house, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of something that we were talking about. So you specifically deal with the financing
Yep.
of purchasing a new home. So something we had mentioned is, you know, if you're gonna leave the house and you're gonna go rent somewhere, would it be a better choice instead of renting to maybe purchase a second home loan?
So, I mean, I think you can. I would honestly say, you know, talk to your attorney first, because I think that it potentially muddies the water with another asset that now you're bringing on board prior to making any decisions. But yeah, I mean, you can buy it as a second home, you know, and then, you know, depending on how far and what the location is, and if you can carry those 2 mortgage payments and what, you know, what your financial profile looks like. I mean, it is an option, but, you know, frankly, it's, you know, I always tell people, I mean, just tell your loan officer, if you're buying something, tell your loan officer everything so that we can at least guide you, you know. So
The
they
best way.
Yeah, because, you know, sometimes people don't always tell us things and then it comes up in the last minute, and this is, I think, is one of those things where, you know, if something comes up or you start filing, you know, while you're purchasing, all of that can come up. So I think, you know, be as transparent as possible, and I would always kick it back to whoever it is that they're working with, you know, from a legal standpoint, so that they can at least guide them through a purchase like that.
Yeah, so keep in mind, prior to any divorce filing, there's no restriction on what you can do with your assets,
Mm-hmm.
okay? So if you wanna take your assets, if you wanna liquidate your 401k to buy a new house, that may not be a good financial decision, but you're not restricted, right? There's no order in place that says you can't do that. However, once you start taking what would be considered a marital asset, and you start to liquidate that to buy something else, that all gets factored in a divorce
Later on.
later on.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're gonna say, okay, well, you used $100,000 of your 401k, that's part of we gotta count that back in.
You know,
when we're
that's
dividing up
part of it.
the pie.
We're gonna add that in, whatever we need to add that into.
Yeah, and likewise, if you're gonna, refinance, it happens all the time where a couple decides, okay, we're gonna get divorced. I don't have the money to buy another house unless I get my equity from this one.
Right.
You could do that during the process of the divorce, before the divorce, but that all has to be done kind of with the okay of the attorneys that are involved, right? Because once you're divorced, there's orders in place that say, listen, you can't really liquidate stuff unless everybody agrees or the court approves it.
So I mean, it could be like a couple, let's say, I'm sure not every single divorce is like, we hate you, like, you know, and I'm sure some would be like, all right, well, I know that I want to at least take care of my kids, so we're gonna have to buy another house so that we can all like live in the same space. And what's nice is like, it would only be 10% down for a second home.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it does offer you that flexibility, so I think, divorce is such a specific thing, to the people that are involved. So I would say, yeah, I mean, it is an option. I would also say you need to have your team involved when you're making that decision, because I think everyone needs to be on that same page and understand what the goal is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the team is important because I, as an attorney, although I do real estate in my firm, I don't know the value of these homes, right? I don't know the terms of financing. Yeah, I know I can look online and see a mortgage rate is 4% or whatever. I can guess that my house is
You're
worth.
not a real estate professional. Well, there's a little more to it, you know?
I can guess that, okay, I think my house is worth $300,000. I know it's not worth $100,000, I know it's not worth $1 million.
Right.
But there's a big difference between a house I think is worth $300,000 and it's actually worth $450,000.
I literally drove by a developer. I was like, by the way, the comps for new construction in this area are $350 to $375. Why were you trying to get that number? I'm going to make you $150,000 more, and it's going to comp out because I created the comp. Like, I have it right here. It's my listing.
But it's so important to have
knowledge,
right?
Right.
That's
just the numbers, right? It removes.
It's going to remove the fear. It's going to remove the uncertainty, and it's going to be you want to achieve in any divorce.
A financial goal. I mean, right, like as much as possible, right, for both everybody to be happy and walk away with something.
And it has to be equitable. Okay, so
touch on that, because I thought that was super interesting.
So most people think, well, divorce, it's going to be 50-50, right? We're going to take whatever we amass during the course of the marriage is 50-50, okay? And what I see, for the most part, in Rhode Island, is probably that demographic is between the ages of 38 and 45. They've been married 15 to 20 years. They have a couple of kids. And basically everything they have at the time of divorce was earned during marriage. They get married a couple of 3 years out of college, they have nothing but student loan debt. So over the course of time, they built up a house, some 401k, so forth. For the most part, yes, it's a 50-50 division. However, Rhode Island follows, the division is under equitable distribution, right? So there's 15
plus. What
does
that mean?
Yeah, there's 15 plus factors that says, okay, it should be 50-50, but we have to do it equitably. So we look at how long you've been married. What's the contribution
So 1 year is
made?
really not gonna cut it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're married for a year, I mean, you can't really expect that you're gonna get 50% of the assets. Maybe what was accumulated during marriage, and you can divide that out, but the court looks at length of the marriage, the contribution of the parties during the marriage, conduct of the parties during marriage, right? They look at,
So the conduct?
Conduct.
Like how they behave?
How they behave, if there's abuse, something like that.
Okay.
Some factors. So when you look at the house, you have to have a team around you because you want to maximize the value, okay? So that we can say, okay, there's, instead of there being $100,000, there's $150,000, okay? And what went into that and how we divide it. So, and you can't trust, you're in a divorce, okay? okay? I don't wanna sound angry, but in a divorce, you cannot trust your soon-to-be ex-spouse that they're gonna have your best interest in mind.
Right.
Right?
It's true. I mean, it's
We
funny to
laugh.
have to say that because I mean, you see clients, and that is kind of how we start talking about it. But like, it's people feel nervous or they're like, well, this person wouldn't do that, but you can't because now at this point you have to figure out you have to take the emotion out of it, and that's where you come in.
Yeah, well, that's, there's, not always, but in a lot of cases, there's a disparity in power, there's disparity in income, sometimes they go hand in hand, okay? And I'll give you an example. So, there's a situation where there's a couple, they're not divorced, haven't filed yet, but they know they're getting divorced, they haven't lived together, and they have 2 homes. And the husband decides, okay, I'm gonna sell the home that we're renting, okay, it's an income generating property. And
I'll buy it.
Yeah. Well,
Seriously?
husband decide, now the property's held by husband and wife.
Mm.
Husband decides that it's a good idea to sell it to the tenants. The tenants have been in there for 10 years, they're good people, they're paying all the time. And that's fine. But they agreed on a value without consulting wife. And there was no real estate broker. There was no attorneys involved.
Yeah.
So the sale between husband and the tenants wasn't necessarily arm's length. Now, it wasn't fraud, right? I mean, they sold it for a few $100,000. But the fact of the matter is, had they had a real estate agent,
Yeah.
the real estate agent would have said, hey, you can do this private transaction, but your house is worth $500,000, not $300,000.
And that's what I mean, for me, the most important thing in my business is to bring the net sheet. So it just literally says, this is what you would make, and I do a range. So, depending on where you are, maybe it's $50,000 range, $100,000 range, but we're in a range. And it's like minus expenses, taxes, commissions, everything. This is how much you're gonna make. Is this a good number? And then you're like yes or no. But if you don't know, then you don't know.
Yeah, you're giving up money. And in that case, there was a disparity in income and power. So wife felt, she wasn't earning any money, stay-at-home mom. And she felt that husband was aggressive, was taking charge. She didn't have anyone in her corner.
Mm-hmm.
So she can't argue from a position of power or knowledge to say, no, that house is really worth X.
And I have this to prove it, yeah.
Yeah, so, again, had she had someone like you,
Right.
or you, or me, that would say, well, wait a minute, hold on a second. Maybe selling the house is the right financial thing to do, and those monies are gonna be split.
Yeah, let's just take it a step further.
Yeah, there's no
One
need.
step. I literally, you can call me at 609-598-2232.
There's no need to rush into it.
Right.
There's absolutely
It's just
possibly
real
no
estate,
need,
it's gonna be there.
right? The real estate's gonna be there. The buyers we know today in this market, the buyers are there,
100%.
right? Because there's nothing for sale. The buyers are there. There's no reason to rush into it. I mean, you both know, if you rush into a decision, somebody's not getting a fair share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because they're gonna feel pressure, well, we're gonna do it now. These tenants are there for you. We owe them that obligation. I'm like, no, you don't. Absent.
You could literally just make a 5-minute phone call, send me your
That's right.
address, and we can come up with numbers.
Right, or at least
That's it.
ballpark, right? You don't necessarily need, in that situation where it's a private sale, or even a public sale, yeah, we know we wanna get sold it. I'm not as concerned about, well, we could have gotten 525 and we only got 520,
Yeah.
right? That's debatable, I'm not concerned about that. I'm concerned about, we only got 300 and we could have gotten 500.
Yeah. I'm like, listen, I paid for myself already by the amount that
Yeah.
legitimately, like you're not paying any,
Well-
and you're doing less.
There's no reason why you still can't sell it to the tenants, right? If you just do it the right way.
Absolutely not.
You still do that, right? So if you still
You
feel
still do
obligated
that.
I would
to
have
do that.
definitely done it on the open market.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you could have made a decision to say, okay, yeah, we know we're losing X number of dollars by selling it to the tenants because they can only pay.
But you didn't even
500.
give them that number.
Right.
Because you didn't even know what it was.
Somebody's laughing.
Right.
And it's new buyers that have a house in instant.
True. I mean, yeah, and like they're like, what I've delivered like 27 offers and none of them got, this, they're like, oh, we live in it, we bought it. Yeah, that's it.
But so now here's another question. In that type of situation,
Right.
who do you use as a realtor? Who do you use as not like if you're going to step aside and say, okay, I'm going to get divorced, I'm going to buy my own house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I can use whomever I want as a realtor, as a mortgage person. But if I have the marital home and we're going to sell it.
Yeah. Listen, I don't know anybody in Rhode Island. I'm not even from here originally. I live here now, so I have no. But you have to get somebody who is going to be
Neutral.
professional, neutral, and it has to be about the numbers. Like, guys, we're going to do the best job that we can here. All right, and the goal is to make as much money as possible for you guys to continue on your future for your kids.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think if you're in that situation, like, okay, we're going to have to sell the house. That's the only way we're going to make it work. Neither of us can afford to buy our own. We're going to need that. We'll buy something down the road. Okay. My point is, when you have to have a realtor, one that they both agree on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Aren't some assigned by the courts though?
If it gets to a point where we have to petition the court to say, listen, force a sale, the court would ultimately appoint someone. Okay. Usually what happens is the attorneys get together and say, okay, who do you think? We get a list of a couple of different people, and we come to an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 90% of the time, or maybe 99% of the time, if I have a licensed, experienced real estate person, I'm less concerned. But I'm more concerned about having a realtor and or a mortgage person that understands the divorce process. Okay?
Right.
Because it's not, listen, you know, because you have these folks in your office, when there's no divorce, buying a house that you're going to live in is emotional.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay? Selling a house that you've lived in for a period of time is emotional.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, you might be saying, yeah, I'm now making more money on buying a bigger
It's a
house.
huge transition for most people.
Yeah.
So, but divorce has that particular anxiety
Mm-hmm.
attached to it, where they need to have a realtor and a mortgage person that kind of understands that dynamic, right? Because it's not the same thing where you call a client and, like, oh, I've got an offer on your house to sell it. And you have to be prepared for, okay, what's the number? You have to be prepared for your client on the other end crying,
Yes.
okay?
I'm like, girl, we're good.
Yeah.
We got this.
So it's different. It's
Yeah.
different because attorneys. There's some attorneys that will never, ever handle a family law case.
Mm.
Okay. There's other attorneys that they do it every day. They understand it. They get it. There's clients of mine that I have clients from a divorce. Within their divorce, they are totally different people
Mm-hmm.
than when we deal with them in their corporate capacity.
Right.
Right? It's a different animal. So you have to be comfortable
That's a great point.
dealing with someone who understands the process.
Yeah. It's a great point.
Because right? You're representing these people, sale of their marriage. You have to hold their hand.
Yeah.
Like sometimes literally hold their hand as part of that process. Where there's a lot of realtors who are like, well, no, here's the number. I don't want to hold your hand.
Right.
I got you a great number.
What's the problem?
And,
Yeah.
and the transaction's going to go off okay, but I don't really know how to handle the emotional side of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the client is left feeling like, oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I getting the most amount of money? Because my real estate agent is not being receptive to, my emotional concern.
Right. So I want to gear a little bit more towards some of the stuff that you had to talk about in terms of the premarital assets. Is that what we're gonna do?
Well, so I think, from a financing standpoint, there are a lot of things that will come into play. So whether or not, let's say you decide, okay, we're gonna wait till after we have some sort of agreement in place, and then I'm gonna look for a home. So, that's what the client says they're gonna do. One of them, whether they end up, staying in the home, selling the house, whatever it is, I think sometimes in the middle of the process, people you know, in their emotions and in, you know, in everything that's going on, they start thinking, okay, well, you know, especially right now, oh, I should just buy something, you know, rates are going up and this and that, and like, they just wanna do everything at one time, because then once the papers are signed, they wanna be done. But there are a lot of other things that come into play.
So I think that when you and I had talked, it was just so cool to kind of hear why, you know, what questions you had asked her to just really get her to the right place that she needed to be in.
Yeah, so I think, one, if you're collecting child support, you know, you need to have it, so let's just say the divorce is not finalized. You need to have some sort of agreement, separation, like actual paper or document, separation agreement that was filed. We can work with that. Let's say you're getting X amount of dollars in alimony, child support, whatever it is, I need to have that for 6 months. And it needs to be documented, it needs to be the right number every month, and it needs to be on time every month. Because, you know, one thing I'll see is, you know, people, especially in that moment, you know, sometimes they'll say, well, you know, I didn't wanna ask, or, you know, whatever the story is, and sometimes it's not consistent. Okay, well, that's a problem, right? Because now you're not getting your child support consistently every single month.
So you would recommend, like, it's very important for them to know, like, when everything's coming in, so when they're purchasing, we're not at the end of the transaction, they're ready to buy something, and there was like a month missing, and then they have to run around.
And it can't be like, you know, half on this date, half on this date, and then the next month it's, you know, the full, it can't, it has to be consistent, it just has to make sense, right? So I think that's one thing that I often see, where then that can prolong the buying process, because now I need 6 months from whatever date.
That's great advice. So.
Yeah. So, you know, definitely the 6 months, you know, of whatever the payment is, the agreement, if you're divorced, the divorce decree, all the documents, all the pages, all of it, right?
How many pages is it?
Oh, they're normally, like, a separation agreement?
I don't know, I mean,
they're normally, 20 pages long, 15, 20 pages long.
It'd be fun, you're just like scanning in your divorce papers.
Yeah, I mean, and so, you know, so send us everything, so, cause you know, we need the full documents, just like, you know, when we ask for bank statements, even if the page is blank, we still need it, right? So same thing applies here. And then if you're paying child support, you're going to be paying alimony, now that's a liability. So, you know, conversely, you know, if you know, okay, I'm gonna have to pay X amount, okay, well then that might be a good conversation for you to have with me, with your attorney, because then we can figure out, maybe there's another option, instead of paying this every month, because maybe you need to show a certain amount of income, maybe there's another option that you guys can explore, so that way, when we do get to the lending piece, we don't necessarily have to count as much every month, because we have to now debt you, however much you're paying the other individual, so, and that's immediate, so that's not, we don't need the 6 months for that, right, because that goes against you, right, so, you know, it's 6 months that you're collecting, essentially, and, you know, if you're paying
the seasoned funds,
yeah, and then, but if it's immediate, then that's, you know, then we just need to see that you're doing it, you know, and we need the agreement, so I think, you know, the paper agreement, I think is sometimes, especially if you're just getting just the separation agreement, I know sometimes that, you know, depending on what is happening with the personalities, at the very least, if we can get that, we can at least start moving forward with the lending process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a separation agreement, so when are people, like, what is a separation agreement, like, how long, what does it mean?
Yeah, so the separation agreement is basically the agreement that describes how you're distributing the marital estate. Okay, and it addresses everything from, you know, child support, child custody, to what are we doing with the real estate, bank accounts, and so forth. Okay, so that normally is done at some point during the course of the divorce process.
Okay.
98% of divorces end in agreement. There's very few that actually go to a trial. Okay, but sometimes we're actually back and forth negotiating that settlement agreement up to the day that you have your final divorce hearing. So sometimes, if they're going to be reliant upon child support to qualify for mortgage, even though maybe, you know, the paying spouse has been paying it all along, they're not paying the amount that the court says they have to, or the agreed amount, and they're not going to have that agreement presented to an underwriter until the end of this deal, right? But there's nothing to prevent you from basically agreeing to all of that, getting the document ready. I just did it the other day, where we drafted the property property settlement agreement and actually had everything signed off on before we actually filed. Because one of the parties was refinancing, okay? And it addressed child support. I don't think that person needed child support to qualify for the refi. But it was done before the filing. We did the settlement agreement and then immediately filed. So that the bank could say, okay, there's an actual case and we have an actual settlement agreement signed by both parties, okay? So it would be up to the underwriter to accept that, whether it was actually approved by a court or not. But essentially it becomes a contract, and it says, okay, party A is gonna be paying, $1,000 a month in support. Or, and even more importantly, if they're refinancing the marital home, they have to have the other party that's signed off on their, whatever interest they have. So they say, yeah, when this is refi, I'm gonna sign a deed, signing away all of my property rights, my interest, my homestead interest in this property. Okay, and that's part of the settlement agreement too. Okay, so that can be done, like I said, we do them up front. If you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you sort of have amicably resolved it, right? And you kind of know in general, okay, wife is getting the house, husband's gonna get, the vacation home, or we're gonna split the accounts 50-50, that's great. We just need an attorney, maybe there's a couple of minor issues we have to deal with, and then draft it. Those can be done like right away. I mean, you don't need a court to draft your agreement, because the court is there to approve it.
And then, I mean, this is not on like real estate, but in terms of divorce, like how does it work when you own businesses? Like how does that all get split up?
Well, it depends on how the business is owned, right? If there's partners involved, but essentially it's the same thing, because that business is an asset.
Right.
Okay, so that asset.
As it should be.
Well,
it's a business.
yeah, I mean, so the question is too, we get this a lot of time, if you're let's say you're an attorney, and you have a small practice. Well, oftentimes your practice can't be sold, right? There's a lot of law offices, 2-3 people in the office. It might generate revenue every year, make money, but it's not as though you can go across the street and say, okay, will you buy my practice for $1 million?
Yeah.
Okay, because the income comes because of you as the attorney or the CPA, whatever. So those are viewed more as, that's your job.
Right.
You have to open up the books, potentially, and say, okay, I'm not hiding money, whatever, but that's your income. We're not selling that, we're not valuing that as an asset necessarily. But if you owned, like, let's say you owned a restaurant, the restaurant had been there for 20 years and had a name brand, and you had real estate attached to it, whatever, or you could sell it.
Right.
Right, someone was gonna go and buy
it's marketable.
XYZ restaurant, it's marketable, that's an asset that has to be considered in the divorce. And whether, the other party has an interest. That's what we talk about equitable distribution, like when did that restaurant start? Did you put any equity into that?
Right. What else do you wanna talk about?
And also with alimony child support, it needs to be you need to have at least 3 more years. So 3 years, it needs to be continuing for 3 years. Meaning, if you have a 16-year-old child and you're only going to collect child support for 2 years,
right?
That's not a reason. Right? We need to be expecting it for the next 3 years.
So basically, right?
Yes.
So you would have So it's like if you're 16 and then you're finishing when you're 18. It's over.
Exactly.
So then how would you prove that you could, afford the house? That actually happened to me. One of my clients. Yeah. And I forgot this, and then it was like during COVID, so she couldn't even like go to the courts or anything and get anything. It was terrible. I felt so bad.
People don't necessarily always need child support to qualify, right? So it might mean that we have to look at other options. It might mean if they have the ability to put more money down. It might mean maybe we'll look at the purchase price. There's a lot of different options. So I would say, if that's the case, and that's why I always say too, is like you have to be super honest with your lender, right? Because we will we're gonna find out what's happening, right? So you'd rather that we find out now.
Yeah, everyone would. Everybody would literally love to know.
Right, and so that's the benefit, right, of just being that open book. And I think also the best case scenario in a situation like this is when you do choose to leverage the team of professionals and everybody's on the same page, because then that transaction can move as smoothly as possible. So if that does happen, then that's where we need to explore other avenues to get you into your next place.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I think I'd like to end on a positive note, because I think that was kind of the most interesting part about our conversation when we first met, was really about, you know, the grass. There's a place that's going to be good. You know, you're in it right now, but there's going to be a place in the future that's going to be so much better. So tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So a couple of things. Every single one of my clients will come in the first time, and you can visibly see anxiety, right? You can see in their body language, their tone of voice, just their overall attitude that there's an issue, right? And it's impacting their psychological well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But then at the end, right? Particularly if it's like a couple of months after everything's finally done, and they're in that new routine, right? Maybe they've got the new house, or they've refinanced, and now it's theirs, right? It's their own house. It's a totally different change. It's like a switch went off, and this person went from being, doom and gloom to happy, right? And this is particularly important, and I mentioned like small business owners, right? If you're in sales,
Mm-hmm.
you own your own business, you have to be physically and mentally on every single day to sell effectively.
Yep.
Okay? And I, as an attorney, same thing. Like, I'm not a salesperson, but I'm a salesperson. I have to sell my ideas to the other side or to the core. Happy. And I know that if I'm in a good mental space, or if I can work out in the morning and I get a good night's sleep, I'm going to be better.
Right.
Okay? But if I'm in a relationship, in a marriage that's dismal, and your partner is negative, and your partner doesn't build you up, and your partner says, you're not a good person, you're a bad person, you're not smart, you're not a good business person, you're not this, that, and the other thing. You come into the office on Monday morning, you're like, all right, what am I going to do? Right? You're losing money. And I hear this all the time from like business type people, salespeople. I don't want to get divorced, it's going to cost me too much money. Right?
Yeah.
The
Like it's not
legal
happening.
fees, and I'm going to give up too much, and blah, blah, blah. And my response is, it's costing you too much money to stay married.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing no one any good for you to be miserable and your spouse to be miserable. And I have clients, I think one client, that literally within a year
Yeah.
has more than doubled his income.
Oh yeah, you told me that. I was like, it's amazing.
More than, it's sales type
Yeah.
position, more than doubled his income.
Right. Well, because you can't go to work happy if you're not happy. And for us, when I show up to my job, I show up like you're gonna get the best of me. And I think that was that was so important to really, I don't know, to just to get out of that space where you have so much negativity and the room is almost like oppressive that you can't even,
Yeah, it is, again, I'm a JD, not an MD, so I can't necessarily speak to, your psychiatric and psychological well-being,
Right.
okay, other than anecdotal evidence. And I can tell you that when people get divorced, it's like, it's a new world for them, and it's a happy world. And as much as people think, how am I gonna make this meet? How am I gonna do this? How am I gonna do that? I'm gonna be alone, blah, blah, blah. A whole new world opens up. And it's just, like, for those people who are sitting there saying, I don't know if I wanna do it.
Right.
What am I gonna do? But if you're waking up every day and just like miserable, right? And you've tried the counseling, and you've tried that stuff, because that's important. You need to make a move and just get divorced, right? Because the grass is greener on the other side. Okay, absolutely, 100%. I have clients that they come back and they're just like, why didn't I do this sooner?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Did you want to add anything else?
I think, I would definitely 100% agree with that. I think, I've had through the tears and the conversations and all that, I've had, clients come back to me and just say, thank you for telling me everything I needed to hear, even though I didn't want to hear it. And that, it makes you feel better, and it makes you realize, okay, it's tough to deliver information to people sometimes.
Right.
Especially when they don't want to hear it, but it's your job to tell them. When they come back to you and they tell you, listen, things are much better now and I'm happy, and that, it just makes your heart smile. And I think that's really important. And I think, sometimes when people are going through this type of a life event, it's just nice to know that you can get to that point.
Totally. And I think everything that we do, and kind of what I loved about, you know, having this event tonight was just being able to really like have a real group of people that can kind of understand what you're going through and be there when you need to be there and really be that professional through the tough time. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, you can check out our website, sdmlawgroup.com, or give me a call. My office is right here in Eastside Providence, 401-455-0002.
And you can reach me on my cell phone at 401-339-1554.
She's like, so don't call me at 12 o'clock at night. That's gonna be a morning call. But you could reach me, Meg Mutt, 609-598-2232. We're so excited. We've been hosting like a lot of different events. One of the next events that we're gonna host, which I'm very excited about, is buying real estate in the metaverse. $500 million in real estate sales happened this year. And yeah, we're just doing any and everything about real estate. We did our previous talk, which you came to, which was awesome. It was about short-term rentals and how to invest. So for me, I feel like I really want to be able to invest in my community, and that means through education, bringing people together on different topics. And if there's any other topic that you guys are interested in learning about, you know, message me. And then you can also follow me on my YouTube channel, Meg Mutt Realtor. I go and knock on doors in Newport, and yeah, just continuing to educate and inspire. And I always say, please, 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 we have this awesome space on the east side. I always say we pay rent here, so if you have anybody who you ever want to use this space for any kind of events, workshops, if you have an artist, a singer, whatever, I encourage everybody to come and use this space for free. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.